Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. I'd like to thank you for joining us today. Just a few things to start with. If you have anything to chat about during the webinar, please feel free to use the chat box in the lower left-hand corner. If you have any questions about the webinar or anything for the presenters, please use the Q&A box that's located in the lower right-hand corner. In the very middle bottom is the presentation for download. It's available in PDF form or in PowerPoint form. And toward the end, all the questions will be read aloud and the presenters will answer them. Also, if you can, chat in who you are, where you're from, and if you have any other colleagues who are attending this webinar with you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Melissa Harrington, and I am a lead grant program specialist at the COPS office. I'm also here with my colleague, Bill Faith.
Hi, this is Bill, and I'm a staff accountant with the COPS office, and I'll be reviewing the budget workbook today.
Welcome to the COPS Purpose Area Number 1 2018 CTAS webinar, and thank you so much for your interest. COPS Purpose Area 1 provides funding for 2 activities: the hiring of officers and/or equipment and training. All of our materials to help you prepare your 2018 application is on our homepage, which is www.cops.usdoj.gov, or on our Tribal Justice website, www.justice.gov/tribal, to help you prepare for the 2018 application. Materials include the CTAS fact sheet, our solicitation, our frequently asked questions, and also our allowable and unallowable cost list for COPS Purpose Area Number 1. Also, the recording of this webinar, as well as all our webinars, will be available on our Justice website. The COPS Purpose Area Number 1 area provides 2 funding activities: the hiring of officers and/or equipment and training. What's new for 2018? Project abstracts are strongly encouraged for 2018. There is a fillable project abstract template in GMS at grants.ojp.usdoj.gov, and this site will also have all the other documents you will need to complete your application. Applicants must budget to attend 1 meeting in D.C. to include estimated costs for travel and accommodations for 2 staff to attend 1 meeting in D.C. for the required CTAS training new grantee orientation. The demographic form, as it relates to Purpose Area 1 and its submission requirements, have been updated. It is only applicable to Purpose Area 1 applicants. And this form is designed to capture the unique characteristics of each tribe in order to paint a more detailed picture of each tribe's strengths and challenges. Purpose Area 1 is intended to expand the implementation of community policing and to meet the most serious needs of law enforcement in tribal nations. The goals of Purpose Area 1 are to address these needs, to increase the capacity of your agency for a safer community, to enhance your capacity to prevent, solve, and control crime, to implement or enhance community policing strategies, engage in anti-meth activities, in strategic planning, and a new goal this year is to address human trafficking. Addressing human trafficking could be one of the goals and objectives when describing your request, and how this request can relate to crime reduction and capacity building. Also, human trafficking training is an eligible training course one could apply for in 2018. An additional human trafficking training and technical assistance is eligible for tribal law enforcement. Additionally, what's new is overtime. Overtime is eligible for sworn officers engaging in community policing this year. Overtime expenses requested for sworn officer positions must be listed in the Other Costs section of your application's budget. We will discuss the specific overtime funding caps later on in this presentation. Additionally, a reminder regarding the point of contact information found within the budget detail worksheet. Please note there is a budget point of contact section within the worksheet. Please fill it out. This helps us as we go through your budget reviews if we have questions. The budget point of contact info should include a name, phone number, fax number, and email address of that person who's helping to fill out your budget detail worksheet. In 2018, CTAS applicants will submit documentation reflective of their legal authority to apply for funds under CTAS on behalf of their tribe. Recognizing that tribes have different forms of tribal governance and tribal laws vary, no prescribed form of documentation will be required. So you may submit a resolution, letter, affidavit, or other documentation for this tribal resolution. If you cannot submit electronic application through the GMS system, you may contact our response center no later than February 15th. You may call 1-800-421-6770 or send an email to tribalgrants@usdoj.gov to discuss how to submit alternatively. COP Purpose Area 1 provides the following goals. Applicants can request funding for hiring, training, and equipment to advance community policing and help address public safety concerns. Again, this year, human trafficking is a new goal for 2018. Who's eligible under Purpose Area 1? Federally recognized tribes, Alaska Native villages and corporations, and tribal consortium consisting of 2 or more federally recognized tribes are eligible to apply. Applicants applying as tribal consortiums must submit documentation of authority as described under what an application should include section of the solicitation from each tribal consortium member, unless existing consortium bylaws or other tribal governance documents allow action without explicit authorization from the member tribes and consortium. In that case, a copy of the bylaws or other governance documents that allow the tribal consortium's actions without explicit support from all consortium members must be included with the application. Applicants must have an established law enforcement agency that is operational as of March 20th, 2018, which is the close of our application, or receive services through a new or existing contract for law enforcement services with the BIA or a state or local agency. Please note the application deadline is March 20th at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard. All applications must be submitted by this deadline. The COPS office anticipates awarding approximately $20 million, approximately 50 awards. Due to the limited funding available, we are restricted to funding based on the following parameters. Sworn force of 1 to 9, you're eligible for up to $300,000. Sworn force of 10 to 19, up to $600,000. Sworn force of more than 20 or more, up to $1 million. The Purpose Area 1 grants are for a 36-month implementation period for awarded officer positions to cover the salaries and benefits, or one-time purchases for allowable costs incurred during the 36 months. There is no local match requirement. We provide 100% of the funding for approved law enforcement hiring, equipment, and training costs. Under hiring, and for those interested in hiring, tribes will request funding for salaries and benefits for officers. We define a career law enforcement officer to be an officer hired on a permanent basis who is authorized by law or by state or local public agency to engage in or supervise the prevention, detection, or investigation of criminal law violations. Background background investigations may also be requested for the newly hired officers only. Additionally, tribes may request funding for civilian salaries and benefits for a mess coordinator. Please note that the mess coordinator is the only allowable civilian position we fund under COPS Purpose Area 1. All other requested salaries and benefits for other civilian personnel positions are not allowed or unallowable. In addition, tribes may also request items to fund a meth-related project. They may request officers, meth coordinators, and equipment to address a meth problem. Please refer to our 2018 allowable and unallowable list that provides an itemized listing. Allowable items one could apply for in the equipment category are shown on the screen. Equipment such as law enforcement equipment, uniforms, bulletproof vests, vehicles. Technology, computers, hardware, software, mobile data terminals, radios. Training, law enforcement training such as basic, comprehensive, or specialized police training. Again, this year, human trafficking training. Again, please refer to our 2018 allowable and unallowable cost list that provides an itemized list of these. Further categories one could apply for is travel, such as airfare, lodging, and mileage reimbursement for meeting or training costs. Again, please make sure you include your costs associated with the required DOJ new grantee orientation training. Meth coordinator position, again, is also eligible. Overtime costs for sworn officers. Again, please note that the meth coordinator is the only allowable civilian position we fund under COPS Purpose Area 1. Overtime costs are eligible this year. Please request these expenses in the other cost section of your budget. Overtime expenses must exceed the expenditures that your agency is obligated or funded to pay in its current budget. We also have a cap for overtime requests. Overtime requests are limited as follows. Sworn force of 1 to 9, no more than $25,000 in overtime costs. Sworn force of 10 to 19, no more than $50,000 in overtime costs. Sworn force of 20 plus, no more than $75,000 in overtime costs. And again, because of the decreased funding amount available and increasing competitive nature of TRGP, the COPS office will continue to impose caps on our 2018 awards. The caps again are sworn force of 1 to 9, you're eligible for up to $300,000. Sworn force of 10 to 19, up to $600,000. 20 or more, up to $1 million. A couple of points regarding the budget worksheet. Please use the budget template. It's highly recommended. A signed current indirect cost rate agreement must be included at the time of application, or it must be noted in your budget that you never received an IDC rate. If the rates expired at the time of application, then you should be able to demonstrate that negotiations with the Interior Business Center for a current rate are in progress. If the rate is expired at the time of application, the approved amount of indirect costs will be calculated and placed on hold until a current, fully executed, and approved IDC negotiation agreement is submitted to us. And a special note to avoid duplicating sworn officer salary and fringe benefits. For agencies that do not include fringe benefits, such as vacation, holiday, etc., as part of your base salary and typically calculate these separately, the allowable fringe benefits may be included in Section B of the Budget Detail Worksheet. And now I'll take it on to my colleague, Phil.
Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Bill Faith. I will be discussing the Budget Detail Workbook for Purpose Area 1 regarding the 2018 CTAS application. The current slide is showing a list of reference materials that will prove to be valuable to you as you work your way through the application. The 5 listed here are particularly important if you anticipate requesting funding through Purpose Area 1. There are 9 categories on the CTAS application budget detail workbook. The COPS office uses only 8 of the categories as construction is not allowable under Purpose Area number 1. If your intention is to hire an officer or a MEF coordinator, please read the eligibility requirements for Purpose Area 1 in the solicitation. There also may be some value in reading the frequently asked questions because your questions may have been asked before. Generally, DOJ funds must be used to supplement existing funds for program activities and may not replace or supplant non-federal funds that have been appropriated for the same purpose. Grant funds must be used to increase the amount of state, local, tribal, or BIA funds that otherwise would be budgeted for these purposes in the absence of DOJ award funding. The Purpose Area 1 CTAS Budget Detail Worksheet was redesigned to be more user-friendly and to reflect software updates. Most notably, you will find more instructional language throughout the worksheet. Just look for the little red triangles and hover your mouse pointer over top of the triangle. There are numerous areas on the budget worksheet that have helpful information at your fingertips. You are strongly encouraged to use the workbook when completing the proposed budgets, and fillable versions are available for download. An applicant that chooses to use a different format should ensure that all budget and demographic information requested in the provided workbook is included. The budget detail worksheet should provide the detailed computation for each budget line item, listing the per unit cost and the quantity of each line item to show how it was calculated by the applicant. For example, costs for personnel should show the current negotiated annual salary for an entry-level officer with reasonable anticipated increases in year 2 and year 3. In addition, please list the appropriate yearly totals for each allowable fringe benefit that will be paid by the agency for this salary. The budget detail worksheet should present a complete itemization of all proposed costs. There should be a clear link between the activities proposed and the items included in the budget. Here is an image of where the little red triangles are located. When you hover your mouse over the pointer over the triangle, you will see a dialog box similar to the one at the bottom of this slide. The budget narrative should thoroughly and clearly describe every category of expense listed in the budget detail worksheet. The DOJ expects proposed budgets to be complete, cost-effective, and allowable. For example, reasonable, allocable, and necessary for project activities. The narrative should be mathematically sound and correspond with the information and figures provided in each line item of the budget detail worksheet. The narrative should explain how the applicant estimated and calculated all costs, and how they are relevant to the completion of the proposed project. The personnel category allows you to request funding for the following positions: sworn law enforcement officer and/or civilian methamphetamine coordinator. Utilize the reference materials available to you to determine specific eligibility requirements for each. All newly hired, additional, or rehired officers funded under Purpose Area 1 must engage in community policing activities. Salaries and fringe benefits for a methamphetamine coordinator may be requested specifically to address methamphetamine issues within the tribe. This is the only civilian position available. Applicants requesting funding for hiring must plan to retain grant-hired officers for 12 months after the expiration of the grant. The retention requirement does not apply to the civilian methamphetamine coordinator position. This slide provides an image of the personnel category of the budget detail workbook. Select the appropriate button to choose sworn officer or civilian position. Civilian can only be a meth coordinator. Enter number of positions requested. Enter the negotiated annual salary for an entry-level officer in year 1 with reasonable anticipated increases in year 2 and year 3. The fringe benefits category allows you to request funding for the portion of allowable fringe benefits that are provided by your agency as a required match per federal regulations or an approved percentage of the total negotiated cost of a specific fringe benefit. For example, agency portion of health insurance. Fringe benefits should be based on actual known costs or an approved negotiated rate by a federal agency. If not, based on an approved negotiated rate, list the composition of the fringe benefit package by individual line items. Fringe benefits are for the personnel listed in the budget category and should be reflective of the benefits that all other employees of the agency have available to them. All requested information must be included in the budget detail worksheet and the budget narrative. This slide shows an image of the fringe benefits category and shows that there are 9 fringe benefits listed by name. You will record the amount for each line item using the percentage columns that your agency contributes in addition to the salary. Enter the appropriate total by percentage for each line item for each year based on that year's salary. Vacation and sick leave cannot be requested twice. If you offer your employees the ability to accrue vacation and sick leave in the base salary, you should not include a separate total for those line items. The other category can be used to include items that are not listed by name but are considered allowable costs. Please refer to the most current allowable cost list. Provide greater details about the items that you have requested in the narrative section at the end of the category. If the other cost line item was used to request allowable fringe benefits, list each item separately in the narrative section. This slide identifies 2 questions that need to be answered and also demonstrates the dialog box available to you when you hover the mouse pointer over the red triangle for vacation and sick leave. You must answer the 2 questions at the top of the fringe benefits chart. Yes means that you allow vacation time and sick leave time to be accrued as part of your salary. If you answer yes, do not enter separate amounts on the line items for vacation or sick leave. The travel training category allows for registration, for transportation, lodging, and per diem reimbursement for meeting or training costs related to purpose area activities, including costs associated with any DOJ-required training and anti-methamphetamine training. Describe the purpose of each travel request in reference to the project objective, show the basis of computation, show the number of trainees and the unit costs involved. Identify the location of travel if known, or if unknown, indicate to be determined. Indicate whether applicants' formal written travel policy or the federal travel regulations are followed. Using GSA and looking for their website, I would recommend you bookmark that page. Refer to the FY 2018 allowable and unallowable cost list for guidance on potential training activities. This slide provides an image of the travel training category. Click on the appropriate button to add or delete a travel training expense request. Enter the event title and the location of the training event, if known, or if known, unknown, indicate location to be determined. Enter a brief description under the item narrative and plan to provide more details in the narrative section below. Enter the total cost for each expense type in the cost per staff column using estimated expenses for 1 staff. The total in this column will be multiplied by the number of staff, and identify the total number of staff traveling in the number of staff column, properly calculated costs that will be shared by more than 1 staff. For example, 1 taxi ride shared by 2 staff. All requested information must be included in the budget detail worksheet, and the budget narrative should provide greater details about the items that you have requested. Describe the purpose of each travel request in reference to the project objectives. Show the basis of computation. For example, 6 people to 3-day training at X dollar airfare, X dollar lodging, X dollar subsistence. Indicate whether applicants' formal written travel policy or federal travel regulations are followed. Note that travel expenses for consultants should be included in the consultant travel data fields under the subaward subgrants procurement contracts category that will be shortly addressed. The equipment category allows you to request funding for law enforcement equipment, uniforms, bulletproof vests, basic issue equipment, police vehicles such as police cars, SUVs, ATVs, and boats, as needed for law enforcement purposes, to include anti-methamphetamine activities. Technologies such as computer hardware and software, mobile data terminals, narrowband radio upgrades, and dispatch and communication systems. Applicants that do not already have an information gathering system compatible with the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Uniform Crime Reporting System are encouraged to apply for funds to pay for National Incident-Based Reporting System UCR compliant crime data systems. Applicants can also request hardware and software required to access national crime justice-related databases. Explain in the narrative section how each item in the equipment category was calculated and how each item is necessary for the success of the project. Also describe the procurement method to be used in the acquisition of the item. This slide shows the image of the equipment category. Click on the appropriate button to add equipment or delete selected. Click on the empty box in the item column, then select the item from the drop-down menu. If not available, type a separate name for the item being requested. Enter a brief description under the item narrative and plan to provide more details in the narrative section. Enter the quantity in the column labeled number of items and enter the per unit cost in the column labeled cost. Indicate whether your organization will use their own capitalization policy or federal regulations for classification of equipment. The federal threshold for non-expendable items is defined as having a useful life of more than 1 year with a fair market value greater than $5,000. Provide greater details about the items that you have requested in the narrative section at the end of this category. Contact the COPS office to discuss disposition of equipment. All right, supply category allows you to request funding for expendable items costing less than $5,000. If you are requesting items that might be considered equipment but do not meet the capitalization policy in effect, then you should place those items in the supplies category. List items by type, standard issued apparel, uniforms, accessories, binoculars, books, radios, recorders, and show the basis for computation. Generally, supplies include any materials that are expendable or consumed during the course of the project. All requested information must be included in the budget detail worksheet and the budget narrative. Not there yet. Go up to. Go backwards to. This slide shows an image of the supplies category. Click on the appropriate button to add supply or delete selected. Click on the empty box in the supply items column, then select an item from the drop-down menu or type a separate name for the supply item being requested. Enter a brief description under item narrative and plan to provide more details in the narrative section. Enter the quantity in the column labeled number of items and enter the per unit cost in the column labeled cost. Include expendable equipment items costing less than $5,000 with a useful life of less than 1 year. Provide greater details about the items in the narrative section at the end of the category. Construction is not applicable to COPS grants under Purpose Area 1. Procurement contracts. If you intend to take out a contract with a vendor, provide a description of the product or service to be produced by contract and an estimate of the cost. Indicate whether the applicant's formal written procurement policy or the federal acquisition regulation is followed. Applicants are encouraged to promote free and open competition in awarding procurement contracts. A separate justification must be provided for sole source procurements in excess of the simplified acquisition threshold currently set at $150,000. Refer to the DOJ Grants Financial Guide for more information regarding this topic. Subawards and subgrants. Provide a description of the federal award activities proposed to be carried out by any subrecipient and an estimate of the cost. Include the cost per subrecipient to the extent known prior to the application submission. For each subrecipient, enter the subrecipient entity name if known. Please indicate any subaward information included under Budget Category G, Subaward Subgrants, Procurement Contracts, by including the label Subaward with each subaward entry. Refer to the DOJ Grants Financial Guide for more information regarding this topic. This slide shows the image of the subaward subgrant procurement contracts category. Consultant fees. For each consultant, enter the name, if known, service to be provided, hourly or daily fee per 8-hour day, and estimate time on the project. Consultant fees in excess of the DOJ grant-making component's maximum rate for an 8-hour day, which is currently $650, require additional justification and prior approval from the respective DOJ grant-making component. All requested information must be included in the budget detail worksheet and budget narrative. Travel expenses for consultants should be included here in the consultant travel data fields under the subaward subgrant procurement contracts category and not in the travel training category. Refer to the DOJ Grants Financial Guide for more information regarding this topic. This slide shows an image of the consultants category. Select the appropriate box to add an item to an expense type, then enter the appropriate information for each line item and provide greater details in the narrative section at the end of this category. The Other Cost category allows you to request funding for allowable items that cannot be identified as any of the other categories we just covered. You should list your requested items by type and show the basis of the computation. All requested items must be listed in the budget detail worksheet and greater detail provided in the budget narrative. Overtime will be listed as a single line item entry in the Other Costs category labeled Overtime for the entire eligible amounts of overtime that you are requesting. This amount includes your hourly overtime rate as well as the corresponding eligible fringe benefits applicable to that rate. Review the chart in the Frequently Asked Questions document for maximum allowable costs for overtime, and keep in mind the potential effect of overtime on indirect costs, as that may limit your potential purchasing power. This slide shows an image of the Other Costs category. Include items that cannot be defined as any other category that we have covered. Click on the appropriate button to add item or delete selected. Enter the costs accordingly for each line item selected. Provide greater details about the items that you have requested in the narrative section at the end of this category. Indirect costs are allowed only if A, the applicant has a current federally approved indirect cost rate, or B, the applicant is eligible to use and elects to use the de minimis indirect cost rate. An applicant with a current federally approved indirect cost rate must attach a copy of the rate approval, a fully executed negotiated agreement. If the applicant does not have an approved rate, one can be requested by contacting the applicant's cognizant federal agency, which will review all documentation and approve a rate for the applicant organization. Or, if the applicant's accounting system permits, costs may be allocated in the direct costs categories. Narratives for any indirect costs should clearly state which direct costs the indirect cost agreement is being applied to. All requested information must be included in the budget detail worksheet and also in the budget narrative at the end of the section. In order to use the de minimis indirect rate, an applicant would need to attach written documentation to the application that advises DOJ of both the applicant's eligibility to use the de minimis rate and its election. If the applicant elects the de minimis method, costs must be consistently charged as either indirect or direct costs, but may not be double charged or inconsistently charged as both. In addition, if this method is chosen, then it must be used consistently for all federal awards until such a time as the applicant entity chooses to negotiate a federally approved indirect cost rate. This slide shows an image of the indirect cost category. Enter the current indirect cost rate as listed on the approved negotiated indirect cost rate agreement. Enter the amount that will be used as the base. Identify the direct costs in the budget that will be excluded from the base as required by the IDC agreement. Use the narrative section to adequately describe the items that make up the base. Review and understand the rate type that has been approved on your indirect cost negotiation agreement, in order to apply it correctly to your budget request. This slide shows a question regarding indirect costs that has previously been submitted. What happens if our tribe does not include a current federal approved indirect cost rate at the time of application? The answer to that is simply if the rate agreement is expired at the time of application, your expired rate will be used to calculate your request for indirect costs. However, you will be unable to recover those costs until a current rate is approved. The recipient will need to provide the awarding office with an updated agreement in order to begin recovering funds for indirect costs. That is the end of the budget presentation slides, and we're going to open things up for questions. Our contacts are listed on this page. As you can see, is Ann Beeman, Melissa Harrington, and the Response Center, and the numbers appropriate for each of them, or by email to travelgrants@usdoj.gov. So with that, we will start to take questions.
The first question is, if we are applying for multiple purpose areas, may we submit one tribal resolution to cover all purpose areas? Or must we submit a separate tribal resolution for each purpose area?
The answer is you can submit one tribal resolution to cover all of the purpose areas that you're applying for.
Can you please repeat the OT caps?
Sure. For this year, overtime requests are limited as follows. Sworn force of 1 to 9, no more than $25,000 in overtime costs. Sworn force of 10 to 19, no more than $50,000 in overtime costs. Sworn force of 20 and more, no more than $75,000 in overtime costs. But again, in addition to that, we are still imposing our overall award caps, which are, the caps again are sworn force of 1 to 9 up to $300,000, sworn force of 10 to 19 up to $600,000, and a sworn force of 20 and more, no more than $1 million.
Do you only pick one for vacation or sick leave, not both?
Okay, I'm not really sure where the question's going, so I'll try and explain the whole scenario. If you are requesting fringe benefits, the vacation and sick leave can be part of your salary. In effect, you can accrue hours to take time off. If that is what your policy is, then you are not allowed to add more dollars, to request more funding for the specific line items of vacation and sick leave, since those two items are already listed in your salary above. I hope that helps.
Are fingerprinting systems allowable?
Yes. Please refer to our allowable and unallowable cost list for our current list of items that one could apply for.
Okay, so the next couple of questions are monitoring systems allowable as an equipment item, also e.g. security monitoring cameras?
Yeah, I would just answer the same, and please refer to our allowable and unallowable cost list. If those particular items are not listed, that doesn't necessarily mean that we will fund it or not. The COPS office does reserve the right to deny funding for items that may not be included on this list, or to remove requested items from the budget. But again, it's up to your department to determine what your needs are. You're welcome to apply for what you need. But again, the allowable and unallowable cost provides you a reference, but it's not an exhaustive list. And we will be reviewing certain items on a case-by-case basis. And that's pretty much the answer for the monitoring systems, in particular also the EG security monitoring cameras.
Can we apply for funding to upgrade our communications infrastructure? Example, CAD over cell to cars.
Upgrading communications is eligible, but this is a non-construction program.
Is there a minimum and maximum cap on salary?
Yes, there is. Again, the cap for sworn force of 1 to 9 officers up to $300,000, sworn force of 10 to 19 up to $600,000, and a sworn force of 20 or more, you're eligible for up to $1 million.
Part of expanding our community policing strategy through CTAS is to have a community advisory group. May we include stipends for our advisory group and other expenses? May we include modest hospitality for the group?
As for the hospitality, definitely not. But the first part we'll have to get back. We'll run this through management, and we'll see what we can find out, but we can reply to that at a later time.
And I just wanted to go back to Daniel's question. The minimum and maximum cap on salary, we don't have a prescribed one, so it's up to you all to submit your entry-level salaries and benefits for a full-time officer. What I just shared was the awarded cap, but we don't have a particular minimum or maximum cap on requested salary.
Is the overtime only for those officers requested in the grant, or can it be used for currently performing community policing activities? Is the IDC for OT included in the total amounts for OT or on top of the allowable amount? Are crime scene lighting and kits on allowable costs, lighting for use after dark?
Okay, so the overtime for the officers can be requested, yes, for current officers that perform community policing. They don't have to be for officers that you're requesting. Second part of that question was the indirect cost for overtime. It is not included in the total amount of your request for overtime. It's simply a part of the indirect cost in category I. If your if your costs are eligible for to be put into base, then it will be taken out of the indirect costs at the end. Remember that all categories together make up your cap. So as the indirect cost grows, your cap will be, you will reach your cap a lot sooner. Lighting. The lighting. The crime scene lighting kits in the level. We haven't seen this one, so.
Again, if that's something that you're interested in applying for, please do. And again, we'll review items that are not necessarily on our allowable and unallowable list on a case-by-case basis.
Should we submit bids / quotes for squad cars?
With anything that you submit to us, you don't necessarily have to submit bids, but while you're preparing your budget worksheet, you should have quotes, or you should have done your research to give us a good estimate of how much these requested items will cost. But no, when you submit your application, you don't have to give us bids and quotes. During the course of your budget review, if we might need it, so you want to have it handy. But at the time of application, you don't have to submit it.
How many trainings are required and how many people should go?
For Purpose Area 1, we have just one required training. Traditionally, we've asked for up to 2 people or 2 reps to attend. So you're budgeting for 1 trip. We pick Washington, D.C. as a focus for you to budget accordingly. But under Purpose Area 1, it's just one required training. And traditionally, it's for your first year of when you get the grant for 2 people.
Is the tribal resolution only to give us authority to apply?
Yes.
May we include evaluation costs in Purpose Area 1?
Yes.
May we request consultant funds to hire a grant writer to help us identify future funds for after the CTAS grant ends?
As it stands, funding for a grant writer is not allowed.
Is there a minimum and maximum cap on hourly rate of sworn officers?
Yeah, just to piggyback on my earlier answer, I mean, it's up to your department to determine your entry-level salaries and benefits for your officers. We don't dictate that, but again, we do have our awarded funding cap.
Can we ask for 3 years or 4 years?
Yep, so our grants are for 36 months or for 3 years, unless you get an extension. But there is a retention requirement for the COPS-funded officers in that 4th year. So our grants traditionally are for up to 3 years or 36 months. There's a retention requirement for 1 year after that for the awarded officers, not for a MES position. If you were awarded a civilian position, you are not required to retain that position, but you are required to retain for 1 locally budget cycle for the awarded officer. But again, our grants are typically for 3 years. There is an opportunity for an extension for additional time if needed.
Is the $300,000 cap for forces with less than 9 officers per year, or for all 3 years or 4 years?
The $300,000 cap for a sworn force of 1 to 9 is for all 3 years. It's for the 3-year period.
Aside from construction costs then, can we ask for just communication components such as transmitters and associated installation hardware?
Sounds eligible? Yes. Again, please refer to our allowable and allowable cost list.
Is a resolution mandated, or can we use a letter of support?
Resolution is necessary, is part of our application submission. Any prescribed form of documentation for that resolution will be accepted. I don't think a letter of support, though, will satisfy that. We want to make sure that whatever you submit for the tribal resolution shows your legal authority to apply for funds under CTAS on behalf of the tribe. So the letter of support may not really reflect that.
Are there other factors outside of the published criteria that will affect one's proposal ranking? If so, can you explain this, please?
Here's the question.
Yeah, can you...
The question was in the chat. Yeah. Are there other factors outside of the published criteria that will affect one's proposal ranking? If so, can you explain this, please?
Sure. Primarily, in the solicitation, we outline what we score, the profile, the tribal community and justice profile, the purpose area narrative, the budget detail worksheet and narrative, the project program and timeline. In addition to that, We take a look at perhaps your prior performance in your previous grant, your current award balances, let me back up. So within our solicitation, we mentioned items that we will include in addition to your submitted application to review. We consider some performance factors to include awardees that have completed a strategic plan under purpose area number 2, awards prior funding history, current award balances, underserved populations, populations served, geographic diversity, strategic priorities, past programmatic performance, significant concerns of DOJ components regarding the ability of the applicant to administer funds, and available funding when making awards. All of these factors will play a role in our office making awards. But on page 63 of our solicitation, it talks about other factors that will be included during our review.
Okay. Can we apply for a modular building for office space?
That would be a no, because that is deemed as construction, and construction is not allowable in Purpose Area 1.
My question is, a resolution mandated, or can we use a letter of authority?
Yes, a letter of authority is the same. Absolutely.
Can funds be used to pay an officer's salary while they are attending the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center's basic police officer training?
Yes. If you hired them already.
Okay, we have a couple more minutes. If you have any additional questions, please include them now in the question and answer pod. Remember that we have presentations for download. If you click on the presentation, and you can hit upload file or download file. And also we have a webinar survey over here in the left-hand side of your screen. If you click on that also, then you click down on browse to, it will take you directly to the survey. And again, if you have any additional questions, you can contact the DOJ Response Center at tribalgrants@usdoj.gov, toll-free 1-800-421-6770. And we will keep the lines open here for a couple more minutes for additional questions.
And the Response Center is open from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Monday through Friday. There's going to be a couple more specific purpose area webinars coming up. But in addition, on February 8th, we're having a Purpose Area 1 Budget Worksheet Completion webinar. And on March 8th, we're having our last webinar, which is a CTAS application checklist review and question and answer. So hopefully, and please do sign up for the remaining webinars. And for Purpose Area 1, again, everything right now is on our home page except for a specific fact sheet. But you have the solicitation that really does outline the program's goals, our frequently asked questions, an overall CTAS fact sheet, our current allowable and unallowable cost list for 2018, as well as our frequently asked questions. Please don't hesitate to contact Ann or myself or the Response Center or email us.
Okay, if we have no more questions, thank you again for joining the webinar today. We will keep the platform open for a couple more minutes, so you can please go and fill out our webinar survey. We take your responses seriously for next year.